over the years, we've actually partnered with Korea in a number of things because one of the things we'll be talking about branding from a very early stage. We recognize the value of the brand of the intellectual property office, which was almost zero in terms of recognition. If how we found out the hard way, if we invited people to a seminar or some sort of outreach activity, we hardly get anybody biting simply because people didn't appreciate what it was, what it meant. Why do I have to be there? And they'd pass on the invitation. And we recognize that part of our job is to get people to get this information because we think it's important to them, especially SMEs. And we, over the years, we've partnered with Karuri because we recognize Karuri's brand is a different brand. They have that kind of recognition with their stakeholders, their hatchery people, and other cohorts. And that's how the partnership evolved. And we're very pleased to be a long-term partner with Karuri in that sense. They make the invitation and we show up and talk. That works out very, very well for us. But what I'm talking about here, though, is intellectual property, or at least finding out what sort of intellectual property assets you may have or should be paying attention to in your business. And you may be saying, but I've been in business so long and I've been doing okay. I've never heard of any of these words, maybe, or not apply to my business. Fine. In fact, you don't need to acquire intellectual property rights to run your business or even to be successful. However, it would be useful to have it if you want to be competitive and even more successful. It's useful in that sense. The thing is, you may appreciate it more when you start being successful, when you start exporting, when you start experiencing competition. That's when the pinch usually arrives. That's when you find us. And we don't want it to be like that, not when you're in trouble. Let's find out about it before you get to the I am in trouble phase. And I'm pleased to say a number of the entrepreneurs who are gathered here and actually exhibiting, they have found us in time and they can all say, yes, we've successfully registered. Ms. Montano's brand, Montano, is registered. It's a trademark because they export. And that's very important. If you have export ambitions, your intellectual property assets should be following your products or your services. And I'm also indebted to the previous speakers, all of them. We could talk for months about the IP aspects of what they do, but I'll spare you this close to lunch. So we're talking about the creations of the human mind, the creations of the human intellect. And we would say simply, the knowledge components of your business, the things that you spend some time or didn't spend lots of time, but you hatched it anyway. You created something unique or new. And we simply ask business owners the same question. What did you create? What did you do differently? You heard some previous speakers talking about finding something to do or doing something new. Right. But let's take that apart. What is this new thing you're talking about? What is it that you created that other people might think are valuable to them as well? How do I retain that value for me because I have just put something out in the market in the public space, especially if it's what we call explicit knowledge that anybody else can copy if I'm not paying attention. That's what you're worrying about, or what you should be concerned about at least. What for example, what some chocolate manufacturers may not want to see is a Montani chocolate. They say, what was that? What's that? And that is actually what your brand gives you the right to do. That's what you protected against. Nobody can just come with a Montana chocolate or Montani chocolate. No, the company would be in this right to chase them. that kind of power you have, or you could have, if you pay attention to what you have. You're a problem solver. Maybe you've invented some new products and processes. That's something to look at. Would it be valuable to other people in the business? A couple of people spoke about creating apps. That's a big, big area. Did I just create an app? Or I should ask more specifically, did somebody create the app for you? Did somebody else code for you? And this brings me to a big point in intellectual property ownership. First principle in IP: if you create it, you own it, or you could own it. If somebody created it for you, they would own it unless they were an employee or they had a contract saying otherwise. That's something critical to look at when we exist in our very easygoing society. When we have friends, we have contributors. Don't study it. It's on me. I would charge you for that, pal. We went to school together. It's all right. Listen, we've heard those stories before, and some relationships have fallen apart because one party got successful, and somebody felt you got successful on my genius. And we can go through the press and for many different stories and track those outcomes. It's something you would like to avoid being attached to your name. So what we are saying is that in the space we are encouraging persons who are in that sort of space, in that knowledge asset creation space. If you can, you should consider acquiring these rights, these intellectual property rights. Because we have to consider the corollary. What happens if you don't have them? As some people would point out to you and point out to me, I have contracts. I say, okay, you know the limitation of contracts, and I am not a legal person. I just work in that. I'm surrounded by lawyers, yes, but I am not one, so I can speak English. When you say there's a contract, the contract, as you well know, it binds the parties in the contract and nobody else. And that's where your danger comes from. The person's outside of the contract. Okay? There's a high degree of control that's granted to the owners of intellectual property rights. You have, in some cases, the right to control marketing, importation, manufacture, and use in some cases. It's a lot of power you can have because you own certain types of intellectual property rights. And you need to be considering, well, what can I register? What should I? Things that you created, the branding, not the name of the company per se. And some people, we always take that time to differentiate. If we approach people the wrong way and ask them, is that name protected? They say yes, the name is protected because what they mean is I registered the company name. What we are talking about is registering your trademark, your brand, the thing that might hit people's ears long before they get to experience your product or your service. They'll hear about you by reputation or advertising or some other old talk, social media, etc. And then you come in closer for a closer view, and you want to make sure that that brand carries some weight, or some good reputation, at least from a good experience, a good customer experience. That's what you want to be attached to your branding or your name. And things like inventions. If you created some new processes, you would like to own those processes as far as possible, so that your competitors don't also end up with the same process. And we heard some speakers talk about things that, well, they didn't own, they brought it to Trinidad, so they had to deal with competition later. I got in the market first, but that doesn't mean I stay dominant in the market forever and ever, especially if I don't own the process. I have to make space where somebody else is going to be sharing the stage with me because I don't own the process exclusively. That is what we are speaking about. If you can, aim for that kind of ownership where you can control a market as much as possible. Because when you don't have that kind of ownership, you don't have really the right to call shots. You don't have the right to enter into licenses or to leverage or use as negotiation if you're trying to acquire licenses or better royalty rates. That is what you're looking for when you own these assets. These assets are just as valuable as your brick and mortar assets, and in some cases, as your company accrues value, in time, your intellectual assets will become worth more than your brick and mortar assets. The bank might not appreciate it, but that is what the market valuation will support, actually. You don't have to read this in detail. This is a question I get asked all the time. So if I own something and I don't want to sell it or manufacture it myself, but I want to license it and earn a royalty, what do royalties look like? It's different for every field. I've just put up some from the pharma industry, uh, and you notice they're all in the single digits. Royalties are not big fat numbers. They're dependent on volume sales over time. The legend is the royalty for the pull rings on soft drink cans that Coca-Cola used to pay close to 1 cent per can in royalties. How does that sound to you? 1 cent per can from Coca-Cola. You understand? If you're not greedy and you're good at math, you'll take that over time. And some entrepreneurs work towards that end of the market where I'm not in the business of selling and retail. I'm in the business of creating and licensing, and that's just a one-off, so to speak. And I'll skip this one. So they're looking at, of course, what do I have to license? Well, what do I have? Quality. Do I have any? Is there anything enforceable on what I have? What sort of market am I playing for? In some cases, um, what are the risks regarding my product? I mean, all these things require some in-depth discussion, which we don't have time for it right now. But there are things that you need to pay attention to when you're considering what do I have, what should I get, what fights should I fight. Just because I have a right doesn't mean that I chase every single. You can't be like you know that dog on your street that barks at anything that passes. That's not you, okay? You can't run down everything that passes in front of you that might threaten your business. You have to pick your fights, okay? And I spoke about things being worth something and later. This is a valuation from a site called Interbrand. I encourage you to go check it out. This is brand valuation only. This is not the value of the company. This is just what, see that little apple with the bite out of it? That alone is worth 400 billion US dollars, not the company. The company's valuation is much higher than that. What I'm trying to encourage you guys, as you heard some of the trepidations and adventures of Steve Jobs, that didn't happen overnight. That happened over a few years. For many years, since 2007, I think when I started reading these charts, Coca-Cola was the number one brand. The brand Coca-Cola used to be worth 77 billion, and they are now in sixth place. In the past 6 years, they've been overtaken by a bunch of tech companies. You notice the trends there? And for bragging rights, if you're driving your Toyota, take some pride. Your brand is worth more than the Mercedes-Benz brand. What I'm saying is these are hard numbers, hard facts. This is not marketing hype. This is just what it is based on the performance of these firms. Okay? One day we hope your firm will be somewhere up there. But you have to start somewhere. Start somewhere, be consistent, grow, go, push it. As you've heard from many presenters, understand that you have windows to exploit these rights. This is a quick and dirty. Copyright and related rights that cover software that lasts for as long as you're alive, as long as the author's alive, and up to 50 years after his death. We have an amendment pending that will extend that to 70 years after death, which means that what? Your rights, your creations can be left to your estate, your grandkids. It could be leveraging your rights in the future. So plan ahead and make your will very straightforward so that they know who gets in what. Your branding, your company brands, your products, they can last effectively indefinitely. They last effectively actually 10 years, but you can renew them indefinitely. We have brands like Angostura. I think Angostura is the oldest brand we have in our books. It's 170 something years old because they keep renewing it every 10 years, right? Patents is a bit of a dead end after 20 years, so you have a much narrow window to exploit inventions and technical innovations under patents. Industrial designs, 15 years. Plant varieties, up to 18 years, etc. So you realize that depending on what you have different windows of exploitation, which is why you need to be aware of them. That's all I'm encouraging. Be aware of them. Be aware of what you have, what you don't have. What do I need to go seek out, and make the effort to do so. Thank you very much for your time and attention.